been socially and politically active in some way, but not necessarily independents, had moved forward into the campaign, particularly after May 2012.
Of all those people who got involved in one way or another, how many of them said that they are still involved and that they have every intention to continue campaigning on this issue?
Yes, one of the things I think is that we also asked is whether they plan to stay involved. And asking the question, do you intend to stay involved in the campaign for Scottish independence? The average score was 4.75 out of a 5-point scale. 5 was strongly agree with that statement. So very high levels of intention to stay involved. But also, because we measured this last year, 4.4, average of 4.4 regarding staying involved with the Holyrood elections. Dips a little bit when we get down into the council elections at 4.19. So there was a very strong feeling that this campaign had been lost, but it was just part of a wider campaign. And I think one of the conclusions I would bring on the overall research when we're thinking, because this constant question that's thrown up in the media, I think they seem to be more obsessed than the Yes campaigners are about what happens next time round. Well, you've got, from the experience from this survey here, very, very high numbers of people who are highly experienced campaigners now, who have canvassed, who've spoken to people, who know how to persuade, who know how to run local groups, who know how to organise meetings, who are well versed in the arguments for independence and those arguments in a civic way rather than an ethnic national perspective. So I think you've got a highly trained and highly motivated group. Don't like to use the word army, but group of individuals who will come out next time round and who are hardened and experienced to it. So I think that augurs very well for the human resource element of the next campaign.
It also seems to contradict David Cameron, who seems to think we're all just going to settle down. He said that the other day. Scotland will settle down with Scotland Light. What you're saying seems to contradict that.
Yeah, it did strike me as being a strange one, because we'd been having a conversation on Facebook around. It seems, for example, that this Holyrood campaign, there are far more hustings. There seems to be an explosion of hustings around Edinburgh. The 4 or 5 of them going on every week. That wasn't happening last time round. And very specific hustings, because people are involved, and they're involved and excited and knowledgeable about their area of what Scotland can be. And we very much found that when we asked them about their future intentions. And they seem to be, rather than just accepting the Scotland Light thing, well, no, we're going to go out there and we're going to really push for answers on whether it's climate change. What I bumped into one during the week on art policy. This volume of engagement is one example through hustings now.
Yeah, there's still interesting times ahead, especially with the EU referendum coming up and what's going to happen there. There wouldn't be any questions in your research about that, or what they think about the next referendum and when it's coming up?
No, we didn't ask those things. We just, do you want to stay involved? And they were going to stay involved. Nearly everybody.
Okay, so no chance of settling down then. That's nice to hear.
I think that would suggest that that's not likely to be the case. Is we also measured people's emotional experience, and emotions are incredibly powerful motivators for future activity. And there was a grievous sense of loss and anger over this, as well as an enormous amount of enjoyment and pleasure. And that's a pretty powerful combination for you to do something else, something you think is worthwhile, something that you've enormously enjoyed the social element and the excitement element of the campaign, and then you were disappointed with the outcome, and beyond disappointed in the outcome. I think that's a real recipe for having the drive. There's all very well thinking you've got some cognitive motivation for wanting to do something, but the power of emotions to continue to stay involved, continue to drive people, I think is another way that the research that we did would maybe suggest that David Cameron hasn't quite understood the shift in political involvement in Scotland.
It's not the first and it won't be the last time that David Cameron misunderstands Scotland, but okay.
Of course, as the others said, maybe he just doesn't care. That's the other thing. I don't know. So he might just be saying those things for that reason.
Yeah. Very possibly. But so if someone's listening and wants to read the full report, where can they actually find it?
They can find it on Commonweal. Commonweal very kindly agreed to publish this, so they have within their library, the Commonweal library, that they have online. So it's available online, and we've just scratched very much top line at the volume of questions that we did, and I must thank profusely everybody who managed to get through this questionnaire. It was exceptionally long, but when you're setting up an academic questionnaire, you make a judgment on how motivated people are to deal with what we call the respondent burden, which is the hard work of having to do it all and think about it all. And for nearly 1,000 people to work through the 64 questions, many of them with multiple items in it, was very hard to do, and gave an insight into the campaign that's unprecedented. So I absolutely thank you very much to everybody who managed to do this, and I'd hope that you could read the report and get a flavour of, beyond the top line, that we thought it was positive. The respondents thought it was positive. They thought that no was negative, that the Yes campaign was hopeful, whereas the No campaign was fear-driven. The top line things that people would say, hey, look, we knew that. But then when we can drill down into some of the more specific activities and the emotional responses that people had, and I think maybe one of the things that I think is critical also from going forward from an SNP and perspective, is when we ask people on a 1 to 11 scale, where 1 is far left and 11 is far right, to put themselves on that scale. They put themselves around about 3.6. We then ask them to put the different political parties on it, and we find that UKIP and the Conservatives are up at 10.5. We find that the SSP are down at just over 1. We find that the activists themselves are much closer to the way they put the Greens than where they put the SNP. So what we have is the activists seeing themselves politically, not just on a left-right scale. We didn't use other dimensions, closer to the Green Party than the SNP. Another additional element that's interesting from there is it allows those people to have conversations. The SNP are close enough and the Greens are close enough. They're not off the end of the scale. Like they're trying to get someone who can find a middle ground between the SSP and the Conservatives is fairly hard work, because there's 10 points away from them. With the scale that we looked at there, the SNP, then the activists, then the Green, they're all close enough, and I think we're seeing that with the intentions, the voting intentions on the list vote for a week's time.
Yeah, with the election coming up, it's interesting there as well. The Labour manifesto launch wasn't exactly marvellous, but I don't know if you saw it.
We did find that 11% of our activists, I think it was 11% of the activists, had been a member of the Labour Party, but by the end of it, only 0.5% were members of the Labour Party.
That is an interesting statistic.
It hadn't worked out very well, as we know, for the Labour Party.
All right, so thanks very much for all that. That's been very enlightening, and I think people should definitely go and read the report. Just one little thing though, it's your second time on the show and you chose the song at the end, and that's what you get the first time. The second time you get to give a recommendation. What do you think the readers should be looking at, reading or listening with regards to the Scottish political scene?
I've been thinking about that. I don't like to recommend anything in particular. Maybe that's a huge cop-out. One of the things that I think that's wonderful about the campaign that has run in Scotland is that there are so many areas that you can look for. I don't like this the feelings that I've got some sort of expertise on this to let people know. I just enjoy the explosion of conversation and ideas that are out there, from the brutal wit of Frankie Boyle to I think to the absolute positive hope that comes from policy hope that comes from the Commonweal, the blogs that you see out of Bella Caledonia, and the podcast. I think it's just not recommending anything, just recommending being part of it and reading. So I'm sorry if that's a real cop-out.
No problem.
But I feel very uncomfortable about all these things typically end up with is recommending some middle-class white male who's come up with a really erudite way of putting things, and I certainly don't want to do that.
All right. So thanks very much, Ian. That's been wonderful.
Okay, thank you, Michael.
So that was Dr Iain Black. I hope you enjoyed that. I think there's certainly a lot of interesting information there, and even things that could help the next time round. Now, I usually hesitate to do these sort of things, but given that every podcast and its podcasting grandmother is doing it at the moment, today is the final day for subscription to the Podcast Awards. If anyone would like to go to podcastawards.com and nominate this one, feel free, go ahead. It would be nice, but if you don't feel like doing it, don't worry about it, because I certainly won't. Now, just the last thing for today, I'm sure you might have read that David Frum, former speechwriter for George Bush and basically right-wing nut, has tried to insinuate that the Scottish independence campaign is something that's been backed and fomented by the Russians. I'm sure that question wasn't actually in Dr Iain Black's research, but that's probably because in David Frum's book it was being funded by the Russians and they would try to hide such a thing. So I think the only song I can possibly leave you with this time is this one. Speak to you next time.
From Russia with love, I fly to you, much wiser since my goodbye to you. I've traveled the world to learn must return from Russia with love. I've seen places, faces, and smiled for a moment, but me so. Still my tongue-tied young pride would not let my love for you show, in case you'd say no. To Russia I flew, but there and then I suddenly knew you'd care again. My running around is through. I fly to you from Russia with